I used to think that love, when real, could survive anything. I believed in loyalty, in the sacred bond between two people who promised to grow old together. For 8 years, I had stood beside my husband Michael through job changes, financial stress, health scares, and the quiet lull of ordinary days. I made his coffee just the way he liked it. I folded his laundry with care. I memorized the way he liked his eggs, the little lines that appeared near his eyes when he smiled, the rhythm of his breathing at night. I never imagined I'd be the only one still holding on when the thread between us began to fray. It started small, missed calls, fewer "I love you." The way he stopped looking at me during dinner, instead scrolling endlessly on his phone. At first, I told myself it was stress. Work had been hard on him lately, and I knew better than anyone how Michael internalized pressure. But something shifted. Not just in the routines, but in the air between us. His touch became mechanical, his smile distant. He came home later and later, always with a vague excuse about traffic, about meetings that ran long, about grabbing drinks with coworkers I'd never met. One evening, I decided to surprise him. I cooked his favorite meal, rosemary chicken with garlic mashed potatoes, and wore the navy dress he once said made my eyes look like oceans. I lit candles. I waited. Hours passed. When he finally came home, he looked startled, as if I'd caught him doing something wrong. He barely touched his plate, said he was tired, and went straight to bed without kissing me goodnight. I sat alone at the table, staring at the cold food, my heart heavier than the silence. The next morning, I woke early and checked his phone while he was in the shower. I knew it was wrong. I had never done it before, but something in me was screaming. There were no texts, no calls. He'd deleted everything. My stomach turned. That afternoon, I followed him after he left for work. I felt like someone else entirely, driving behind him in my car, hoping I was wrong, praying to be wrong. He didn't go to the office. He drove to a quiet cafe across town, the kind of place you'd never accidentally stumble into. I parked nearby and waited. After 15 minutes, I saw her, Wate, a woman with chestnut hair and a long green coat, approach him with a kiss that was far too familiar. I felt my lungs seize. My hands shook. I wanted to scream, to burst in, to tear the moment apart. But I didn't. I just sat there, frozen, as everything I believed about my marriage collapsed in front of me like a house of cards in a windstorm. He didn't see me. He didn't suspect a thing. I waited until they left, watched them walk away hand in hand, then drove home numb. That night, I said nothing. I couldn't. I lay next to him in bed, listening to the steady rhythm of his breath, knowing it was the breath of a stranger. I stared at the ceiling and wondered how long he'd been lying to me, how long he'd been loving someone else while pretending to still love me. And worst of all, I wondered what I had done to deserve this. The next few days passed in a haze, as if I were living someone else's life. Watching from the outside as a woman I barely recognized pretended everything was fine. I still woke up early and made breakfast, though I couldn't eat a bite. I still folded Michael's clothes, though my fingers trembled with every shirt I touched. I still smiled politely when he walked into the room, though the weight in my chest felt unbearable. I kept my secret like a splinter under the skin, invisible, painful, always there. I began to study him. Every look, every sigh, every excuse. I stored them like evidence. I watched him sit across from me at the dinner table, laughing at something on his phone, and wondered if he was texting her. I listened to the lies that rolled so effortlessly off his tongue, marveling at how easily he could betray me while keeping up the act. But I wasn't ready to confront him. Not yet. I needed to understand how deep the rot went before I tore the house down. One evening, as he took a shower, I found his second phone hidden in the lining of his gym bag. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The screen lit up with a message from her, "I miss you already." My breath caught. I opened the thread, and what I found shattered me all over again. Photos, voice notes, plans for weekends I thought he'd spent with old friends. I saw how tenderly he spoke to her, how alive he sounded in those voice messages. It was like reading someone else's love story, one in which I didn't exist at all. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with the lights off, listening to the tick of the clock and wondering how I'd become so invisible. I thought about our wedding day, how he cried when he saw me walking down the aisle, how he vowed to protect me from ever feeling alone. And yet, here I was, lonelier than I'd ever been. I wanted to scream, I wanted to smash things, but instead, I stayed still. Because if I lost control, I'd never get it back. The next morning, I tried to call my sister, but she was busy. I tried to reach my mom, but she brushed it off. "You're probably just overthinking it," she said. "Michael loves you." I realized in that moment that if I wanted to survive this, I'd have to do it alone. My pain was too quiet, too inconvenient for others to hold. And maybe that was part of what broke me. The loneliness within the betrayal. The way no one else seemed to see me drowning. Michael acted as though everything was normal. He kissed me on the cheek before leaving for work and made plans for dinner with his parents that weekend. I nodded and played along. But deep down, something had shifted. I wasn't the same woman he'd grown used to, the one who forgave easily, who looked away, who loved blindly. Something was awakening inside me, something fierce and cold and waiting. I knew I needed a plan. Not revenge, not yet, but clarity. I needed to confront the truth head on, no matter how ugly it was. I needed to ask him the questions I had been too afraid to voice. But first, I needed to see how deep his deception went. And if anyone else had known all along. It took everything I had not to explode that weekend when we visited Michael's parents. I had never noticed how much they resembled him, not in looks, but in the way they ignored discomfort. Everything in their home was curated, pristine, detached from reality, like a glossy family photo hiding the chaos behind the scenes. His mother kissed me on the cheek and complimented my hair while his father asked about work as if nothing were wrong. They smiled too easily, spoke too formally, and I couldn't help but wonder if they knew, if they had always known. During dinner, Michael's phone buzzed on the table. I saw the name light up, Sophie. He silenced it quickly and pretended it was spam. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. I looked at his mother. She didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. That told me everything. She knew. Later, while Michael was helping his dad in the garage, I slipped into the kitchen where his mother was arranging flowers. I decided to test the waters. "Do you think Michael's been acting strange lately?" I asked, pretending to be casual. She looked up, her smile too tight. "Men get tired sometimes," she said, carefully placing a rose in the vase. "You just have to be patient. Don't push him too hard." It wasn't an answer. It was a warning. A quiet way of saying, keep your mouth shut if you want to keep this life. I realized then that they would always protect him no matter what he did. That I was an accessory in their perfect family narrative, disposable if I made too much noise. Back home, the silence between us grew unbearable. I no longer cried. I was too drained for tears. Instead, I began writing everything down. Dates, lies, names, even the message logs I had secretly saved from his second phone. It wasn't just for me anymore. I was preparing for the moment when truth would be my only weapon. One evening, I confronted him. I asked him directly if there was someone else. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize either. Instead, he sighed like I had inconvenienced him and said, "Why are you always so sensitive?" That sentence hit me harder than any confession. So sensitive. As if my entire world imploding was a minor inconvenience. He told me it was a mistake, that I was imagining things, twisting things, blowing them out of proportion. The gaslighting was so calculated, so casual, that for a second, I actually questioned myself. I almost believed him. Almost. Then he said something that lit a fire in me. "Even my family thinks you're too dramatic." You always make everything about you." I froze. That confirmed it. They had known. They'd been discussing me behind my back, painting me as unstable while he lived a lie. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just nodded and walked out of the room. Because in that moment, I realized that I wasn't just losing a husband. I was shedding an entire illusion of love, of family, of safety. I was finally seeing things clearly. The next morning, I stared at myself in the mirror longer than usual. My face didn't look like mine anymore. It was a version of me that had aged quietly in the shadows of unspoken pain. I traced the outline of my cheekbones, wondering when exactly I had started shrinking just to keep the peace. The woman in the mirror looked tired, yes, but there was something new in her eyes, a clarity, a simmering kind of strength. I began rehearsing what I would say if I left. I imagined packing my bags, walking out without a word, watching Michael's expression when he realized I meant it. But I also imagined his family's response, how they'd whisper about my instability, how they'd say I overreacted, how they'd comfort him like he was the victim. I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was afraid they'd convince the world that I was the one who broke everything. At night, I went into our shared closet and found the shoebox where Michael kept old birthday cards and letters. Buried beneath dusty envelopes, I found a folded note with handwriting I didn't recognize. I unfolded it slowly, heart pounding. And there it was. A confession of love. A woman thanking Michael for last weekend, for making her feel alive again. No names, no date. But the handwriting wasn't mine, and the words weren't meant for me. That was my last thread snapping. I didn't scream or confront him that night. Instead, I made tea, sat at the kitchen table, and stared out into the dark yard while the note lay open beside me. I felt strangely calm. The kind of calm that comes when there's nothing left to break. The next day, I visited my sister Hannah. She had always been my opposite, bold, impulsive, and capable of silence. When I told her everything, she didn't gasp. She didn't try to console me. She simply said, "Let's ruin him." I laughed genuinely for the first time in weeks. It felt good to be believed without being questioned. Together, we came up with a plan, not for revenge, not in the childish, vengeful sense. This was something sharper, more elegant. I would leave him, yes, but I would do it in a way he'd never forget. Quietly, unpredictably. I would let him believe for just a moment that I had forgiven him, that I was still clinging to hope. And then I'd vanish, not with rage, but with poise. Hannah offered to help me gather proof. We printed out messages, saved screenshots, backed up conversations. I opened a private bank account, booked a hotel under a fake name, bought a new phone. I started moving pieces of myself out of the house bit by bit, while Michael remained oblivious. He still kissed my cheek in the mornings, still sent me heart emojis from work. He thought he had won, but I was just getting started. In the days that followed, I became an actress in my own life. I smiled at Michael when he told his half-truths, nodded politely when his mother called and asked how we were doing. I hosted dinner for his family one evening, just like old times. Candles lit, napkins folded, my pain hidden behind layers of practiced charm. I watched them laugh around my table, completely oblivious, and for the first time I felt powerful. Michael's mother, Claire, complimented me that night, said I was glowing. I smiled, thanked her, and poured more wine into her glass. She had no idea that just 2 hours earlier, I had transferred half our savings into an account she didn't know existed. That behind every smile was an exit strategy unfolding in real time. My sister Hannah kept reminding me to stay focused. Don't act early. Don't give them anything they can twist into a reason to blame you more, she said. She was right. They were waiting for me to crack, to scream, to storm out. Anything they could call proof that I was hysterical. But I gave them nothing. I gave them polite laughter, clean floors, well-cooked meals. I was the perfect wife until the day I wouldn't be. Then something unexpected happened. I found out I was pregnant. I stared at the test for an hour, maybe longer. I couldn't cry. I couldn't even move. This wasn't part of the plan, and I had just started building my escape, had almost found myself again. And now, life threw me something that made everything feel uncertain again. When I told Hannah, her face went blank. "Is it even his?" she asked after a moment, then winced. "I'm sorry, that wasn't fair." I nodded slowly. I don't even know what I want to do. The truth was, I didn't feel anything toward the baby yet. No joy, no anger, just confusion, like I was being dragged in two directions by invisible hands. I hated the idea of raising a child in this mess, but I also hated the thought of giving up before I even knew what the baby could become in a better life, far away from this one. Michael noticed I was quieter than usual. He asked if I was okay. I lied, of course. I said I was tired. I said work was stressful. He offered to cook dinner that night, as if playing husband for an hour could erase the months of lies between us. That night, I watched him as he stirred the pasta, humming to himself. He looked peaceful, content. It was infuriating. He had destroyed so much and still moved through the world untouched, unaware. He had never once apologized, never admitted anything. And somehow he still believed he deserved this life, this family, this home. The next morning, I saw a message pop up on his phone from a contact saved under a man's name. But the message, "I miss you already," told a different story. The deception wasn't just continuing, it was evolving, getting smarter. He thought he was clever. That's when I decided the game was over. The exit plan became a countdown. I spent the next week in silence, not because I had nothing to say, but because if I started speaking, I knew I'd scream. Every sound Michael made felt like sandpaper against my skin. His voice, once familiar, now grated on my nerves. The way he chewed, the way he cleared his throat, the way he smiled at me like we were still us. It all felt unbearable. I started packing small things he wouldn't notice were missing. Jewelry, a few clothes, my grandmother's locket. Every item felt like a piece of myself being reclaimed. I booked a storage unit under a name he didn't know. Quietly, I began to peel myself away from the life we had built. A life built on lies. Meanwhile, Michael was planning a weekend getaway to reconnect. He said he'd booked a cabin, just the two of us. The irony made me want to laugh. He thought a fireplace and wine could undo betrayal. I agreed to go. Not because I wanted to fix anything, but because it would give me time. Time away from his family, time to think. Time to say goodbye to the version of me that tried to make this work. When we got there, it was beautiful, quiet, remote, almost too quiet. And for the first night, I almost let myself believe we could pretend. But then I found a second phone hidden in his jacket pocket while he was in the shower. It was unlocked, and everything spilled out like poison. Photos, messages, voice notes from more than one woman. There were even messages mocking me. "She still has no clue," one read. "She's so desperate to be loved." I don't remember exactly what happened after that, just colors, sounds, my heart pounding like a war drum. I didn't confront him. Not then. I just walked outside into the freezing cold night, barefoot in the snow, trying to remember how I got here, how I had allowed this to be my life. The wind burned my face, but it didn't hurt as much as staying would. Back inside, he came out of the shower smiling, talking about making cocoa. I watched him, this man who had broken me piece by piece, standing there with no idea that I knew everything. I didn't say a word. I just nodded and said I was tired. And when he fell asleep, I deleted every message from that phone, every trace, then dropped it into the fire. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window watching the snow fall. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't scared anymore. I was done grieving. I was done begging for love. I was done playing house with someone who only loved himself. The next morning, I told him I needed to go home early, but said that I didn't feel well. He looked concerned. I almost laughed. He offered to drive. I let him. One last performance for the man who thought he could outsmart me. By the time we reached the city, I had already sent the message to my sister. It's happening this week. Be ready. The next few days passed in perfect calm, or at least that's how it looked on the outside. Michael thought everything was slowly returning to normal. He kissed me goodbye in the mornings, sent texts during the day, asked what I wanted for dinner. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was orchestrating the last act of a play he didn't even know he was in. I visited his family one final time. They welcomed me with the same cold smiles, the same barely concealed disdain. His mother made a passive remark about how emotional women like me always overreact. I just smiled. For once, I didn't defend myself. I didn't need to. They'd see soon enough I had gathered everything. Photos, screenshots, voice recordings, timestamps. I had it all printed and bound in a single thick envelope. I labeled it for when you're ready to know who he really is. Then I placed it quietly into the drawer of his mother's hallway table while she was showing me her newly painted kitchen. She never saw me do it. That night, while Michael slept, I packed everything I hadn't already hidden in storage. Every item I touched felt like a goodbye kiss to the woman I used to be. I left my wedding ring on the nightstand with a note that simply read, "You win. She can have you." At dawn, I walked out of that house for the last time, and it didn't feel like escape. It felt like resurrection. By the time he woke up, I was already states away. My sister had helped me rent a place under a different name. New apartment. New job already lined up. A quiet little town where no one knew my face or my story. He called, dozens of times. Left voicemails, confused, then angry, then begging. I didn't respond. He texted things like, "You misunderstood," and "We can work this out." But I wasn't misunderstanding anything anymore. I had finally understood it all. 2 days later, his family found the envelope. They exploded. I heard from a mutual friend that his mother slapped him across the face. His sister blocked him. Even his father stopped taking his calls. He sent me one last message. "Why would you destroy everything like this?" And for the first time, I allowed myself to answer. I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped protecting what was already broken. I deleted his number, changed mine. I didn't want revenge, I wanted peace, and in giving up the idea of fixing what was unfixable, I finally found it. Now, every morning, I open my eyes without dread. I drink coffee by the window in silence. No pretending, no gaslighting, no lies, just me. Free. And if you've ever felt like no one sees your truth, know this. You're not alone and you're not crazy. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's the first step toward strength. Subscribe to hear more stories like this, because every woman's voice deserves to be heard.